You don't need thousands of followers to start a cult. Sometimes all it takes is one man controlling his own family.
Today we are reacting to How I Escaped My Cult featuring the Pilgrim Family, and it's a powerful example of how spiritual manipulation, fear, and abuse can turn a home into a cult.
This is about control, isolation, physical and spiritual abuse, all hidden under the guise of religion and family values.
Whether it's a mega cult or just one household, the damage is the same, and the only way out is through courage like the kind we're going to see in this story.
Let's talk about what it really looks like when someone uses faith to control and how escaping can save more than just one life.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I was raised in a family with 4 moms and 35 kids. We were members of the FLDS Church, which is a polygamous group run by their prophet Warren Jeffs, who is now serving a life sentence in prison.
I was raised mainstream LDS in Utah. Sam and I have been married for 10 years. 5 years into our marriage, we decided to step away from religion completely, and we have 2 awesome kiddos.
Yes, we do. We want to quickly say thank you all so much for supporting us along this journey. We have officially reached our goal of 100,000 subscribers. It's crazy to hear those words come out of my mouth, but wow, we are so excited, and thank you all so much for your support.
Yes, thank you guys so much. Couldn't do it without you. And today we are coming with a heavier topic once again in this series of How I Escaped My Cult. These ones have been hard to watch. We're about halfway through the series now, and I don't know if my heart can take getting through all of them. Because some of them are truly so sad and horrific, and it's just the same thing. You can see, if you watch this series all the way through, or at this point, I think we're 6 episodes in, 5 episodes, 6 episodes, and seeing the patterns. I feel like if there's one thing to take away from this series, it's you can see the same patterns happen over and over, and hopefully can open up the eyes to everyone as to the same things that cause people to end up in a cult, or the same manipulation tactics that cult leaders use. This is a good example of the fact that not all cults are huge mega religions meant to grow and grow and grow, but that even just one single man can use the same tactics as any other cult leader to be able to control and manipulate his family and do horrible things to them.
Yeah, this one specifically made me very grateful for the family that I had growing up in a group that was very, very controlling and very, I guess, against the outside world, and would teach us about fear and how bad everything else around us was. So we had similar teachings to what we see in this documentary, but thankfully in my specific home, I didn't deal with the kind of abuse that we see here. And man, it just breaks my heart that parents, are the ones in a lot of cases that are harming their own children. I mean, no one should ever get to that point of harming a child. But when you see someone do it to their own kids, to me, that's just a whole other level of
evil.
I will never understand how someone could possibly do that. And we see in this one, like Melissa said, it was all about his family. I mean, he tried to start something. Papa Pilgrim is what he went by, but
not in the beginning. At the beginning, he was just a hippie.
Yes, and he would invite all other people, all other hippies to come and join, and he was just this kind of leader, I guess. And just like the story always goes, when suddenly you realize that people are looking up to you or respecting you in some way or another, these evil men try to take advantage of it and say, "Oh, I received a revelation. Come listen to me."
And that's what he did. So he received a revelation that he was, going from a hippie, that he was now going to be Christian, and that he needed to devote his life to Christianity. And so him doing that, these huge groups of people who were staying on his kind of compound at that point, a big piece of land, and he was letting all these hippies stay. He cleaned up and got rid of like the pot and any drugs, and no one really continued to follow him as the leader that he was for the hippies when he decided to become Christian. But he quickly went to an extremist very, very fast, basically considered himself like self-proclaimed prophet, the one man who can talk to God, which that is always, you see that in every single cult, basically. If there's one person and they're the only person who has direct line to God and nobody else does, That's a red flag for this. And you see it in every single group that we've covered.
Oh, yes, yes. And this is what we said. We said, oh, here we go again. When we turned this on and the episode started and he started telling people, hey, I'm the only one that is receiving the revelation from God. The rest of the world is wicked. You need to stay out of the world, hide from these evil people. Don't trust them. They're out to get us. It was just okay, here we go again. It's the same menu, just a different guy, right?
Yeah.
It's so infuriating. But of course, he does take it in a little bit of a different direction than we've seen before, almost in a worse way. But like Melissa said, all of the people that were there with them, once he proclaimed himself as a prophet, they just left, other than his family.
Yep, they did. And so it ended up becoming just his family. But like Sam was saying, a lot of the isolation, that saying that the world outside was evil. And this is through the eyes of one of his daughters, Elisheba. And she specifically talks about the fact that they were told that the outside world was evil and they would try to preach to people in the outside world. Her father would, and he would say that they were all wicked. Darkness is closing in. We're the only righteous people. We are the chosen ones. Those are all language and verbiage that's very, very common in these groups, saying that you're special and everyone else is evil. And would say that the Bible is his sword. So he was constantly using the Bible as weapons against his own family, against outsiders. And she said every time that people would not convert or not listen to him, that just proved that he was teaching something that everyone else was wicked because they weren't willing to hear the truth, right? And so, again, putting that into them so much so that as things progress and get worse, nobody wants to leave because they're so scared of the outside world because they had been isolated. And isolation is another huge red flag of any type cult-like behavior, right? Creating that isolation for people.
Yes, exactly. And it was the same for me as well. When I was taught growing up that the outside world was wicked, I was so afraid to ever step outside of those lines and actually embrace the world in any way. It was this big, scary place. Yeah. So it wasn't until I saw that there were good people out there that I ever even questioned that what I was being taught was true.
Yeah. Isolation is also a very big tool in hiding crimes and things that people are doing, which is what happened. They were in New Mexico. He is now at this point just with his family. He receives a vision. He has a dream that he's meant to have 21 kids. He decides to go to his oldest 13-year-old daughter at that time, and we won't get into details, but using her sexually and starting to abuse her. And this was different in the sense that at this point we were like, okay, is he going to try to take her on as a wife? Because a lot of these end up with polygamy. At this point, he was using her to have kids with his wife, and which is a whole other different level of frustration. And then we also hear him say these words. He's like, she said, if I didn't, then I would be a murderer. And I looked at Sam and I was like, I don't understand why every single group or a lot of these groups, and in particular the FLDS, they always call people murderers. Like if they don't do what people want, they call them murderers, even if it has nothing to do with murder or taking a life.
Right. And it's as simple as these leaders try to, well, the whole idea is to create as much fear as possible around this, you know, to keep people in line and to keep them being obedient or keeping sweet, whatever, depending on the group. But it's all about just finding the most horrific thing possible and throwing that on them as, hey, this is what you're doing if you don't obey.
Yeah.
You will become the worst thing possible if you don't obey and do what I say, which is a murderer, is just the worst thing they can think of. And then they come up with all these different reasons and excuses why a murder is what they will be.
Yeah, and why it's okay for them to have the abuses. So in this case, he said, you know, God created his daughter, created Elisheba for him, and that this was all meant to be, and this is what God wanted. So much so that the mom obviously understood and was there and participated in the abuse, which is so hard to understand how a mom can let that happen, right? To see the abuse and allow it to happen. And they did talk about the fact that her mom was married to this guy, to Papa Pilgrim. What's his real name? I don't like using their other names. Bobby Hale. married Bobby Hill when she was 16 years old. So she was groomed to be with him, to follow him, to listen to him for many years, and obviously brainwashed enough to be letting this happen with her daughter. And she even talked about the fact that her mom hated her and tore her down because she was almost like this sick form of jealousy that the daughter was getting all of this attention instead of her. But the isolation made it possible because she was always being hidden. The other kids could go play, but she couldn't go and play or do chores or do these other things. So she was just living in this isolated hell until the dad decided to move to Alaska.
Right. And in part of that isolation was, oh my gosh, it's hard to even say, but being with him in the house and then having all the other kids leave. And while he was with his daughter, have his wife, her mom, cater to them and bring him the juice he wants to drink and the food he wants to eat. So the mom is catering to his needs while all of this is happening right under her nose. Like, the amount of manipulation that must have taken to get her to that point where she was just going along with it is beyond comprehension to me. That's nothing I ever witnessed as a young boy, even though I grew up in the FLDS church. I never witnessed that kind of abuse, and so I just don't understand how people got to that point where it seemed okay.
Yeah, but we've also heard from Warren Jeff's wives where they helped groom the next set of girls that were underage girls, and the wives would help groom them and prepare them to perform things in front of each other or on each other. So it can definitely get to that point in these groups if they truly believe that God is telling this man that this is how it's supposed to be, then they believe they just have to be subservient women who are completely obedient to whatever their prophet or their leader or their connection with God tells them.
I agree. And there is no excuse for any of them.
No,
Because
absolutely not.
I mean, take Warren Jeffs, for example, the very, very, very young age that some of these girls were being groomed for him. Unacceptable. Absolutely nothing he was doing has any excuse. He is where he should be for the rest of his life, period. But this was his own daughter in this case. Like, this is next level that this guy Bobby is doing right in front of his wife and mother of their child. Like, in my opinion, that's just next level beyond what these other people were doing.
Yeah. I don't know. It's Warren convinced mothers to allow their daughters to have it happen to them. To me, I'm like, the mother's letting her husband do this, right? And yes, it is his daughter, but she's allowing her daughter to go through with this and be actively abused. And in other groups, there were lots of other mothers who either helped coordinate the abuse or knew what it was happening and allowed it to happen to them as well. And it's hard. It's so hard. I don't think there's ever a way to fully understand why for some women, they're able to let the abuse happen to their kids or even help facilitate it, which is just sickening. And for other mothers, that's what snaps them out of it. And for some moms, they go, that's the line. You can do everything you want to me, but you cannot do this to my kids. It snaps them out and they end up leaving, like the Nubian nation, right?
With Habiba, when it came to her own kids, she said, no, not happening.
Absolutely not.
Right.
So I don't know what it is inside a person that lets and facilitates abuse or says, absolutely, there's my line. These are my kids. I would never let that happen. I don't know if there's ever a way to know what causes that difference in people, but it's horrifying and so saddening to see, especially when it's the mother and the father. This isn't a stranger guy who you trusted and didn't know the abuse was happening to your child. You're helping facilitate the abuse to your daughter, and it's by her father at the same time. Is just it's infuriating.
But of course, he wanted that much more control. So, oh my goodness, he received another revelation that he needed to be out in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, and hiding and not really even having easy access as far as roads are concerned to this remote place that he found in Alaska. They didn't have electricity, no running water, none of the things that we all have today.
Living like you're in the 1800s.
Yeah, and when they finally showed up, they said it looked like maybe even the 1700s. Like it just,
Yeah.
they were living in huts, basically, camping out
In cabins.
long term. So
Yeah, so they end up in Alaska and things continue to escalate and get much, much worse. They were talking about when they got in trouble, the physical abuses that were happening to all of the children, not being allowed to eat, not being allowed to smile, being beat, like severely beat, broken bones, fists, just they were constantly told, the kids were told that they were evil and that that's why this was happening, which is the same as the other group that where the family ended up beating the boy to death, right? In the sense that he was just using that they were evil and twisting the words of the Bible to justify the physical abuse that was happening.
It's so frustrating because he was using in this episode the Bible to justify all of the things he was doing, which his children could see that what was being said in the Bible went against what he was doing. But if they tried to say anything against him, he was the one speaking for God to interpret the Bible, right?
Yeah, he's the only one who could interpret it. Which is where it comes to next in the story, where Elisheba, at 27, he has a voice come to him and tell him that Elisheba is to replace her mother so that he can, I think at this point they had 15 kids because they said 17 of them moved to Alaska, and he needed to get to the 21 of his first vision. And this is where she stood up and was like, this can't be right. This isn't right. And then they start being mean to the neighbor next door. And she goes, I thought you said we were supposed to love our neighbor. And by speaking out on those two things, again, I'm not going to get into detail. You can watch it. It's horrific, but beaten, sexually abused, and physically abused for 5 days, almost on the brink of death. And she said she felt like she heard God speak to her, that she could make it and that she could get out of it. So she survives and, has to wear a ski mask to hide from her family because he didn't want anyone to see what he'd been doing to her.
Yeah. Thankfully, her brothers said, we want to see what's going on, and asked her to take the ski mask off. And she said that she was unrecognizable, barely even looked human with all of the beatings that she had taken. And her brothers finally said, okay, this is not okay, right?
Yeah. And what's crazy though, again, this is craziness because their dad is one man and these brothers are all older at this point. And there's, what'd you say, 4 or 5 of them? They go trying to talk to the father and they're trying to talk to him. They can't convince him. The whole family would watch her get beat every single night in front of them. And all I'm thinking is, how are these boys not overtaking their dad and making it stop? But they eventually just kind of gave up trying to convince him because they still were at least manipulated enough into not trying to physically stop him.
And every time that they would go and confront him, he would just turn around and beat her in front of the family some more. So they eventually just gave up on the whole idea of trying to convince him.
And I was
thinking overpower him.
Yeah, me too.
But it takes a special kind of indoctrination from the moment you're born, right? These boys, yes, they could have physically overpowered their father, but they had been convinced by him since the moment they can remember. Their first thoughts and memories are of him being there and teaching them and telling them how the world is and what they're supposed to do and believe. So to break that is very, very difficult. And we see this kind of thing all the time. I still think they should have done something watching their sister going through that. But I try to understand where maybe they were coming from, because in so many cases, the person that is in charge, even though he may not be the strongest and the tallest and the biggest person there, if people fear them because they had been
abused
themselves or had believed in this person long enough, they are afraid to stand up against them, even if they could have easily overpowered them.
Yeah, it overpowered them physically. The mental and emotional abuse is too much that they don't. Yeah. So the brothers decide to leave. Even after all of this, we're talking brink of death. We're talking consistent beatings, horrible, horrible sexual things happening to her, all of this. And when her brothers leave, they said, come with us. And she said no, because she didn't want to leave her mom and her siblings. And that's another thing. And another thing that you see in a lot of these groups is people are afraid to leave because they're worried of what's going to happen to their family, especially if they feel like they are somehow protecting their siblings. Like, well, if the abuse happens to me, then it's not going to happen to them, right? That happens a lot, especially in the oldest kids trying to protect their younger siblings from these horrors. And so it's just one of those things where she still was like, nope, I need to stay. And then, but the brothers were like, but if you ever need help, just give us a call and we will come get you. And it wasn't long after he asked her to be his wife again. And she stood up to him again. And this time she knew that if she didn't leave, that he would kill her for standing up to him again. And so she decided that her younger sister would be the next one to be abused. So she took her younger sister that was 16 at the time. They went down the mountain in a snowmobile.
Yeah, they waited until he was gone. He went to town to get some things.
Yeah.
And then they said, this is our opportunity. We're going to head out. And they jumped on a snowmobile and went down the mountain. And how far? They didn't say how far they got, did they?
No, but they ran out of gas.
Yeah. So they run out of gas, which of course she's taking it as, oh my gosh, my father was right. He said that if I ever left, that I would be going against God.
And Satan would kill her.
And so she was thinking, of course, having all of these thoughts, similar to the way I felt when I left, that I was just waiting for lightning to strike. Mm-hmm. And anyways, but they got very, very lucky or blessed, whichever way you want to look at it. And there was another bigger, nicer snowmobile right next to where that one ran out of gas, and that one did have gas in it until they jumped on that and headed out.
Well, but they ended up in the woods for 5 days because they kept trying to escape him coming. He was going back and forth searching for them. So they were hiding from him for 5 days in Alaska. They were saying when they left, it was like negative 30 degrees
Fahrenheit.
Yep. And they survived for 5 days. They finally come across, after going in the middle of the night for hours, find a cabin, are able to get a phone, call their brothers, and their brothers came and got them. And just like the final relief of knowing that they were safe. But again, in typical fashion, when someone leaves a group, it's not easy. It's not all of a sudden like, I want to go after them for everything they did to me. They were taken in by a loving family, nursed back to health from the wounds and things that had happened to her. And eventually, about 6 months later, was finally willing to tell the story of what had happened.
Yeah. I tip my hat to this family that took her in and her brothers. So I guess when her brothers first left, they went to town looking for somewhere to stay. And this amazing Christian family took them in, no strings attached. And then when she escaped, they took her in, welcomed her in their home like her own. Just so amazing. And then were so patient with her as she went through this process of not being, even though she had gone through all of these horrible things, they didn't force her to come right out and speak about it. They let her do it on her own time, which was 6 months before she was willing to even tell her story to them.
Yeah. And then when she did, they said, okay, would you be willing to go and talk to the police about it? And she talks about the fact that, at first she was like, no, I don't want to go to the police. But they said, but this is the way to be able to isn't this the way that you could get your whole family out? This is the way that you can save your siblings. Mm-hmm. And this is the best way to protect them. And again, that hope of she was staying because she was trying to protect her siblings. The idea that she could protect her siblings by getting them out of that situation completely is what had her go to the police. And the police ended up doing a plea deal with him to try to make her not have to testify because they knew how terrified she still was of him. And so she didn't have to testify against him, and they were able to do a deal. But it was sad to see, and they showed footage in the courtroom of the family being there, like waiting for him to show remorse, to apologize, to be like, I'm so sorry, I can't believe what I did, anything like that. And all he said was, there's no way that could have happened. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like, everybody was right there in the room. It couldn't have been that bad. And just that they said that they were specifically worried that if he didn't confess, that he would burn in hell. So even after everything that had happened, even their worries towards him were still religious based on what he taught them.
Yeah, and they were afraid, and they still wanted what was best for him in the next life, right? Even after everything they had done, that he had done to them.
You would think they'd want him to burn in hell.
Yeah, but it just shows how convinced they all were. So it's that type of manipulation is very, very difficult to break. But in that courtroom, you saw when he was not willing to apologize, when he said, "Oh, this, it's not as bad as they're saying," and he's just, even though he had already pled guilty at this point,
Yeah, brushing it off.
he was still not willing to admit to anything, and he wasn't willing to apologize. But you just saw the family crying. They had footage of this, and they were all just crying because they all know and witnessed what had happened, and they know that he's just lying now.
Yeah, so it was super sad to see the family go through that. He, again, was sentenced to 14 years, which they believed would be enough for him to die in prison. He actually died in prison 6 months into his sentence. So he is gone. Everybody's on their roads to healing. And I really like what I think it was one of the prosecutors said at the end, that this is an example of how no one can save you from a cult situation other than yourself. You have to be the one to save yourself. You have to be the one willing to leave. You have to get yourself out of that situation before you can help and save other people. And I thought that was really good insight, because sometimes it's so easy to, if you even in some groups, if you see and you just want to go grab people out and be like, let me save you. But really, they have to make that step first. And the best way that you can help people in those situations is to be there when they do make that phone call, like her brothers. When they do make that phone call and they take that first step for themselves, being there for them from that point forward.
Yeah. It doesn't help to force anyone to try to see things your way, right? That's something that we've learned is no one thinks they're in a cult. I mean, you don't realize what you are a part of until you step outside and look from the outside in to see what's going on. And I'm not saying that every group is a cult. I'm just saying that in every case, even in this case where she was being abused horribly, she still, it took a long, long time, even after leaving, to realize that what was going on was really, really bad and not okay in God's eyes. So it just takes a long time to break that feeling of control.
Yep. So glad that she's out now. It seems like she's doing well and thriving. Hopefully the rest of her family is as well, and being able to move past the abuses that they had to go through. But if this can, the same, I know she said that she had written a book about her life and her experiences. Maybe we can find it. Maybe we can put a link down below.
Yeah, we'll try.
For her book. We'll try to put a link down below for her book, and so that people can support her and her journey of being, the aftermath and continuing to live her life. But if anybody out there also is in a situation like this, please reach out for help, because she even said she knew from very early on in the abuse that something wasn't right. And if your gut's telling you that something's not right, then it's not right. And reaching out for help is the best way to get out of it yourself and be able to move forward into, I know people always say that it's this crazy, evil outside world, but there is so much good, and there can be such a life of happiness.
Yes, that is 100% true. There is a lot of good people out here, and though the media makes it seem like the world is going to hell in a handbasket, there's a lot of good in this world. So thank you all so much for being here with us again, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
Talk to y'all soon.